There are places where money should never be allowed to rest. I say this now, after 100 years of life, but no one told me this when I needed it most. And for a long time, I blamed fate. I blamed luck, without realizing that it was me who was pushing away everything I tried to keep. If you believe that simply saving money is enough to prosper, then listen carefully, because that exact belief kept me trapped in scarcity for years, not because I lacked effort, but because I ignored something invisible to those who live in a hurry. In the philosophy I embraced throughout my life, I learned that everything is energy in motion. Nothing is static. Nothing is permanent. And when you place something alive in the wrong environment, it does not grow, it weakens slowly, in silence. I discovered this the hard way when I realized that it wasn't how much I earned that defined my life, but where and how I kept what I earned. Because there are places that appear safe, yet carry the exact opposite energy of prosperity. Today, after crossing an entire century, I can tell you with calm certainty, these are not just mistakes. They are traps. 5 common places that seem harmless, but teach money to run away from you. And if you don't understand this, you may work your entire life and still feel like everything slips through your hands. When I was young, I believed that protecting money was the same as making it grow. I clearly remember the day I started hiding my savings in a place I considered safe, cold, closed, far from any risk. I thought that no one would touch it there. No one would move it. No one would take from me what had taken so long to build. And for a while, it gave me a sense of control I had never felt before. But as the days passed, something strange began to happen. The money didn't grow, didn't multiply, didn't generate anything. It simply sat there, motionless, as if it had lost any chance of becoming something greater. And even when I used it,
It felt like it didn't return with the same strength. It was only many years later, already walking the path of Buddhist teachings, that I understood what was happening. Cold, closed places where everything is designed to preserve rather than transform carry the energy of stagnation. They are environments created to interrupt the natural cycle of life. And money, like everything that exists, needs movement to stay alive. When you keep your money in a place that symbolizes stillness, you are teaching it, even unconsciously, to remain idle, not to circulate, not to grow. You are not protecting it. You are interrupting its flow. It took me a long time to realize this. I spent years believing I was being prudent, when in truth, I was only freezing my own possibilities. And this was the first place where I learned that money should never be allowed to rest. After understanding the mistake of keeping money still, I made another one, perhaps even more subtle. I began leaving small amounts in practical places, accessible, always within reach. It seemed smart, it seemed efficient, but those places had something in common that I didn't notice at the time. They were never at peace. And it was only by observing my own life that I began to notice a strange pattern. Money would come and disappear just as quickly. No matter how much I tried to organize, there was always a sense of instability
as if nothing truly stayed. Years later, already living as a monk, I understood a simple but profound principle. Everything that vibrates in constant agitation transmits that same instability to whatever surrounds it. Places filled with excessive movement, noise, and mechanical repetition are not spaces of growth. They are spaces of dispersion. And when you place your money in such environments, you are teaching it to move without direction, to come and go without purpose. In Buddhist philosophy, we learn the importance of a stable mind. An agitated mind does not create, it only reacts.
And money follows the same principle. It needs intention, direction, and an environment where it can remain long enough to transform. When you keep your money in places where everything spins, vibrates, or constantly changes, you create a direct reflection of that in your financial life. Nothing settles, nothing matures, nothing grows in a consistent way. It took me years to understand that it wasn't just about working more or saving more. It was about where I allowed it to remain. And this was the second place that taught me, in the quietest way possible, how to push wealth away without even noticing. There is a mistake that is even more dangerous, because it looks intelligent, it feels discreet, yet it carries a silent energy of loss. I made this one too. I used to hide money in places no one would ever look, between old belongings, forgotten objects, clothes I no longer wore, thinking I was being careful, strategic, protected from the world. But what I didn't realize was that those places carried a very clear message, not of protection, but of abandonment. Over time, I began to feel something strange. It wasn't just the lack of growth. It was a sense of stagnation, as if my life wasn't moving forward, as if everything was stuck in an invisible point. It was only years later, already immersed in Buddhist teachings, that I understood the depth of it. Everything you keep around you directly influences the flow of your life. Old, forgotten, unused objects carry the energy of the past, of what has ended, of what no longer renews itself. And when you place your money in that kind of environment, you are unconsciously telling it that it also belongs to the past, that it doesn't need to grow, that it can simply sit there, forgotten. Money responds to that. It stops circulating, stops multiplying, loses strength, loses presence in your life. Not because something mystical is happening, but because you are creating a pattern of stagnation. In Buddhist philosophy, we learn about impermanence. Everything must renew itself, transform, move forward. When you insist on tying something to what has already passed, you interrupt that natural flow. It took me time to understand, but when I finally did, I realized I wasn't hiding money. I was teaching it to disappear. And this was the third place that quietly pushed prosperity away from my life without me even noticing. There is another mistake that isn't about where you keep your money, but how you treat it. And this was one of the hardest for me to accept. For a long time, I carried money carelessly, crumpled bills mixed with useless papers thrown into pockets or worn-out objects. I told myself it didn't matter, that money was just money. But over time, I began to notice a subtle pattern. The less care I gave to money, the less it stayed in my life. It wasn't immediate. It was a slow erosion, as if, little by little,
It simply stopped choosing me. That's when, already following the Buddhist path, I understood something deeper. The way you treat anything reveals the relationship you have with it. If you treat something with neglect, disorder, inattention, you are, in practice, saying it has no value. And money responds to that. Not because it feels like a person, but because your mind creates patterns, and those patterns shape your actions, your decisions, your discipline, and, in the end, your reality. When you keep money in a disorganized way, in broken, dirty, or neglected places, you reinforce within yourself a relationship of devaluation. In Buddhist philosophy, we learn about mindfulness, about bringing attention and respect to everything we touch, even the simplest things. And when you begin to treat money with respect, organization, and intention, something changes, not only outside, but within you. You become more aware, more intentional, more responsible, and that naturally transforms how money enters and stays in your life.
It took me many years to understand that it wasn't just about where to keep it, but how to honor what passes through my hands. And this was the fourth mistake. Invisible, yet incredibly powerful, that pushed wealth away without me realizing. Of all the mistakes I made, this was the hardest to see, because it wasn't hidden. It was right in front of me every single day. It was the place where I would say, "I'll organize it later," where I mixed meaningless things with what should have been handled with awareness. A common space, seemingly harmless, but filled with confusion. I would leave money among old papers, forgotten bills, broken objects, things that no longer served any purpose. And without realizing it, my life began to mirror exactly that. Confusion. Money would come in, but I didn't know where it went. It would leave, and I didn't understand how. There was effort, there was work, but there was no clarity. And without clarity, there is no growth. It was only many years later, in silence, observing my own mind, that I understood a core principle of the Buddhist path. Where there is external disorder, there is internal disorder, and money follows the mind. When you place your money in the middle of chaos, you are teaching your own mind to treat it without importance, without direction, without presence. And that reflects in your choices, your habits, and the way you lead your life. Disorder doesn't just hide money, it dissolves your awareness of it. And when you lose awareness, you lose control, lose direction, lose growth. In truth, it is not the physical place that destroys your prosperity. It is the pattern it creates within you. I had to learn, over time, that wealth is not only born from how much you earn, but from the clarity with which you manage, the order you create, the attention you sustain.
And this was the fifth place, the most dangerous of all, because it didn't look like a mistake. Yet it was exactly what kept my financial life trapped in a cycle of confusion. After making all these mistakes, after watching money come and go without ever staying, I finally understood something that changed my life completely. It was never about hiding, never about holding on, never about fearing loss. It was about creating a place of respect. When I began to follow the Buddhist path, I learned that everything you value needs a worthy space, a clean space, an organized space.
an intentional space, a place that reflects what you want to cultivate. And that's what I did. I created a small space, simple but intentional, where money was not thrown. It was placed with attention, with presence, almost like a silent ritual. It may seem small, but it isn't. Because in that gesture, I was training my mind, building discipline, creating clarity, developing a new relationship with something I once treated with fear or neglect. In Buddhist philosophy, there is a principle that guides all of life: intention. It's not just what you do, but how you do it. And when you begin to treat money with intention, respect, and order, something shifts deeply. You stop being someone who reacts and become someone who directs. Money gains direction, gains purpose, begins to stay. But the greatest change doesn't happen outside, it happens within. You become more aware, calmer, more strategic. And without noticing, you begin to build a life where money is no longer something that escapes, but something that circulates in balance. And that is why, at 100 years old, if I could leave you with just one rule, it would be this: it's not about where you hide your money, but where you honor it. Because what is honored remains, and what remains grows.